Everybody, I'm Dan Egan, and welcome to Ski Talk Live. I'm excited. On these hot summer days, you got to find a way to cool down, and there's no cooler cat on the planet than Mike Hattrup. Mike, how you doing today, my man?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks. Good to see you, Dan.
You too, dude. And this is exciting. For you, the whole move to 11. And before we get started, really just tell us about the company you're now working for, and what do they do?
Well, it's they've got a dozen lodges around the planet in really cool exotic spots, and half of those are ski locations. So, and the other half are mostly are either fly fishing or some kind of adventure. I mean, there's a million different things you can do at each one of these properties. So, and that's really one of the cool things because even if the even if for some reason the weather doesn't allow you to fly or go ski, there's so many other things that you can do that often people walk away going, "Wow, that down day was the coolest day of the whole trip. I wasn't expecting that."
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, some wild locations. Just drop some locations on us. I know it's Iceland, right? It's France, it's a few others.
Yeah, Iceland, France, Patagonia down in Chile. Um, there's Revelstoke, Crested Butte, and then we're opening one in the Tordrillos up in Alaska. So
Wow.
that'll be winter 26. So not this winter, next winter.
Nice. And that's heli skiing in Iceland as well, right?
Yeah. Yep. There are helicopters at everywhere except Crested Butte. That's a cat skiing operation. And the cool thing about all these is you go, okay, yeah, heli skiing. Yeah, I've been heli skiing up in Canada at CMH or Wiggly or whatever, but each of these properties is so unique. And the blending, the Revelstoke property is most similar to the other heli ski operations that you hear of, but all the others are so different that yeah, they're super special in one way or another, and some of that's just the location, right? Iceland feels it's that there are no trees, right? Everything's black and white. It feels like you're skiing in an Ansel Adams photograph. Um, but and skiing is just one small part of the trip and the adventure. It's all the stuff that goes around the skiing that make the trips really unique and special and memorable.
Well, all I hear about it is that the lodges are top notch, the amazing service, food, of course, but it's the lap of luxury.
Yeah, and that's true. They are all unbelievable that way, but none of them are pretentious either. I mean, that's not my tax bracket, right? But I don't feel uncomfortable when I go to these places. They feel like a super nice home because they're all pretty quaint properties too. It's not you're not there with 50 people.
So it's outrageous, right? Some of the coolest locations in the world. You're now sort of, what's the official title? What's the job title?
Director of skiing.
Director of skiing. I mean, it's a dream, really, right? So what does the director of skiing do with the dream locations like this?
So I have responsibilities in sales, marketing, and product development. So yeah, it's a little of everything, which is great because that's kind of the way my career's been. It's been fairly heavy in the R&D side of product, but this is a great fit because it's something unique. It's something different than what I've been doing for the past 30 years, but it also builds on all that knowledge and my time. Even when we were selling products, you're usually selling them through experiences. I mean, we had some amazing trips at K2 and some at Fischer as well that you take dealers and people to these amazing places and create a connection with them. And the same thing is with guiding, right? I mean, you've done enough guiding. That's one of the cool things. It's giving somebody an experience that they couldn't have on their own.
It's a special thing, that emotion, right? The emotional attachment when people are like, I didn't know, or I didn't know I could do it, or I didn't know this existed, right? That blows you away every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So is this something, you guys have been working on for a while, or did it just come across your plate? How did it all come together?
Yeah, just, I mean, 11's been around for 13 years, and I was familiar with it right from the start pretty much because one of my old telemark athletes, Heather Paul, is married to John Featherman, who's the the GM of all the properties and oversees the whole thing. So yeah, so I've been aware of it, but uh I was always, it never quite, they actually had a job opening, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago that they talked to me about, but it didn't quite fit for me. But this one rolled up, and I've been working at Black Diamond for the last couple of years and love the company, great people, great product, an amazing brand. But so I wasn't looking for anything new. And yeah, I just got a call and said, "Hey, we got this job." And I thought, huh, and started thinking about it more and talking to more people and go, you have to do this. This is an amazing opportunity. And it just lines up with everything you've done and what you like doing. So
Yeah, I mean, it is ideal, and I was very happy to see. I mean, I think it is like a perfect fit. And but that comes down to, of course, your amazing background as a skier and legendary and everything you've done, but the career, right? The inside, the product development, the R&D. Take us back to really the early days at K2, and what that was like for you to transition into K2, uh, and how you kind of like got your head around it to move it forward.
well, for me, I grew up in Seattle, right? So K2 was on Vashon Island, one of the islands just outside of Seattle. It's a 20-minute ferry boat ride from Seattle. So and just they also, the ad agency that did all the K2 ads also did the Rainier beer ads, which is another Seattle company, and they were all off the, both the K2 and the Rainier ads were off the wall, irreverent, and and you couldn't help but be a fan of both brands. So getting the nod to get a to go to work for K2 was a dream already, as a young skier growing up there. And God, if you could work there, there are not that many ski companies out there, right? Especially US ones. So the opportunity to go to work for one of those was a dream job to start with.
You know,
And it was really good for me because I learned, because I was at the factory,
yeah,
right? I was, and if you worked for any of the other brands, whether it was Nordica or Kesley or Fischer or Rossi, all those factories are in Europe. So you didn't have the same exposure, and that you didn't work with the engineers on a daily basis like we did at K2. So it was pretty special from that standpoint.
yeah. I mean that, and really right from the beginning, you were involved with the K24, right?
Yeah, well, that came later. Um, yeah, I'd been there, I think, 8 years already
Wow.
by the time the four came out. But that was the other thing that was really special and just lucky on my part, that I was working for a ski company, because skis, that was the beginning, the four, and just before that with fat skis, that was the beginning of what we'll all look back on as the golden age of ski revolution. I mean, that was up until then. I mean, you could grab a 50-year-old pair of skis that are off your wall above your fireplace, right? And other than the materials, it looked pretty much like a ski did in the 80s,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't till, fat, shaped, rockered, tapered skis came along that they just went in a million different directions. And it was super fun to be part of that development cycle.
Yeah, I mean, and not only the development cycle, but the messaging, right? It was a whole new lingo, it was a whole new package for the consumer. That whole piece had to come together, and it was a little bit of a learning curve.
for sure. And that was part of the fun part of the process, was going through that. And because we didn't know, we were making it up as we went along, right? So, and that was one of the things we did that's kind of similar to what we're doing with 11, is we would bring people, we'd bring a handful of dealers and media over to Saas-Fee in Switzerland, or down to Valle Nevado in Chile, and go, hey, here's the new product. This is what we're thinking about. What do you think? And we always got their input as well. So it was not just a boondoggle trip to introduce product. It was a learning process too, and they were contributing to the story as well. So we always came out of those smarter than we went in, which I think helped perpetuate those K2 trips.
As a member of the turning generation, and you made your living on the straight skis. Emotionally for you going through this, were you always looking forward, never looking back? You saw what it was going to be and just embraced it?
I'd like to say I had that vision, but no, I was more reluctant. I remember the first time Fat Skis came out, that I saw them, was a trade fair down in Mammoth, and Atomic came out with Fat Boy.
Yeah.
And I think the fat ones were, I'm not sure, but maybe 110 underfoot, something like that. And I'm like, I couldn't get myself to ski on that cartoon caricature of a ski. I thought, that no way. And so I tried the guide, which was 80 underfoot, and it was a foot of new snow. I mean, it was perfect day for it. And so I was slow. And each time there was a new innovation like that, I'm like, because shapes come out, right? And we were the first ones. We weren't the first ones to introduce shape, but we were the first ones to really get behind it, because every other brand had one model that they're going, and here's our shape ski, and
Right.
we're going. I remember we're like, this is better. Like it it's all better. So we're not offering any straight skis anymore, and it
Wow.
was a big gamble.
Yeah.
But it paid off. I mean, we had a bunch of skiers in the building, and everybody's going, yeah, I'm better today than I was yesterday because of this ski.
Yeah. No, it's crazy times. It's crazy. A couple of years ago, Scott and I, out there in Big Sky, we did this night where I showed some clips of my old films. He showed some great stuff from the Stump films, and it was just a fun night going back and forth. But at the end of the night, everybody across the board just was like, those straight skis that you guys skied on was so athletic. It was such a different style. And I mean, do you ever look back at Blizzard of Oz or License and just say, yeah, that was all that hopping and all that pumping and all that turning. It was just something, it was another thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was a lot more work.
Yeah.
And I think for guys our age, it was perfect, because
Yeah.
all this revolution is kind of like
Yeah.
the fountain of youth, because as a skier, you peak in your mid to late 20s, and if you stay fit and healthy, you can stretch that out into your mid 30s, and by the time you hit 40, you're just trying not to get worse every year. And right in those 30s, it's like all of a sudden shape skis come along, and I'm like, look, I make a better turn now than I did when I was younger. And then fat skis and taper, and it's like, I'm better now than I was back then. And it's not because of me, it's because of the gear.
It definitely adds a lot of runs to the day these days. That's for sure. It definitely lengthens it's out, and I'm very appreciative. Whenever anybody asks me, would I want to go back? I go, no way. You got to be kidding me. No. So it's great stuff. I mean, but all of that experience of engineering, R&D, and packaging, working with dealers, communicating to the consumers, that's really a cool mix, right? Because all of this time puts you and others, on the forefront of that communication. And there must have been some like real-time tweaking along the way with different models or different cuts and different designs.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, and we skied on everybody else's stuff. You know, that's how you start the whole development. How we started the whole development process is you got to know who else is out there, and then you pick a few skis that you think are benchmarks that are standouts, and then you go about trying to make a better ski.
And, you know, when you ended up at Fischer, Fischer is such an iconic brand, right? And such an established brand. What was that like for you to kind of, you know, be at Fischer? By then, you know, of course, it's a boot and a ski, right? Of course, binding, but it was the whole package. It was a little bit more mature market, right? And what was the play of Fischer? Just to build the niche that it was, or new product as well?
Well, and you say niche, but that's because your view of Fisher is from the US, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Fisher on a global scale is one of the big players. And you go over to Europe and Fisher is one of the top dogs. And it's the only company of that size that was still family owned.
Nice.
Pepe Fisher was still alive when I was working there.
Cool.
And so Fisher had a, you know, a super rich, deep history and amazing brand and great people. And my concern when I got there was like, I was always used to being at the factory, right? And getting to steer the direction of things, or at least being part of the team that steered the direction. I'm like, as an American, I mean, the Austrians, there's no more country in the world that's more ski crazed than Austria. And there are so many great ski brands, and it's like having those guys ask me for input or getting to provide any input is like Americans building a baseball glove and reaching out to the Austrians going, hey, what do you think we should do with this baseball glove, right?
Right.
They didn't need the help. So
Right.
I was a little concerned on how that was going to go, but they were great. I got to drive the free ride, the development of the free ride collection. You know, they listened really intently, and you know, they're not asking me for any advice on how to build a better race ski or a piste ski. They got plenty of people that can drive that. So, but it was great. I loved working with the Austrians and that team, and it wasn't just Austrians. There was a pretty international group of people there too.
I mean, Mike, really, it's amazing, deep, rich, long history you have with product development in and around skis, and particularly during this time. When you look at all, you know, the face and the players have shifted around so much, and now we see these smaller brands popping up and custom skis and all this. You know, I always say, where's the institutional knowledge that goes along with that? And I just want to get your point of view on that. I mean, it's a great idea to have a handmade custom ski, but a little bit of it's trial and error, isn't it?
For sure it is, because I'm sure if you asked all those little boutique brands, if they built better skis now than they did 10 years ago, they'd all say yes.
Right.
And if you said, if somebody gave you $50 million to invest in engineers and tooling and machinery, could you build better skis? And they'd all say yes.
Yeah.
And then you look at all the big brands that are 75 to 100 years old and, you know, have millions and millions of dollars in machinery and 100 years of institutional knowledge. What people don't understand is that every ski is handmade. I know the little brands go, these are handmade. And it's like, so is everything else. The skis are super labor intensive.
Yeah.
And that touch and experience matters.
And you know, at the same time, the boutique brands have made some headway here, and they've changed the conversation in the marketplace, and they've convinced, you know, to some extent, just by the mere numbers of we see now, consumers to take a look at these things. And I think it's a super interesting time. But part of that is just the rebellion against us as age, right? Our age group. Like, I don't want anything my parents used. I don't want the same brand on my feet, on my goggles or anything. I mean, do you see that? And that these long established brands, just by that mere oldness of the brand, there's a rebellion against? Have you thought much about that?
Yeah, no, I think there's some of that for sure. And some of it's maybe it's what your dad skied on, but some of it's, like you said, it's the big guy. It's the 800-pound gorilla. And people, a lot of people are looking for that, unique brand that, maybe connects more with their mindset or spirit. So, and
Yeah.
to have something different,
I mean,
you
that's
know.
what's beautiful about skiing, right? And I think, I know the Bobby Burns celebration is coming up, and and you mentioned Ace earlier. The ski, there's always been a touch of this in our sport, right? And we love it, right? We love the spirit, we love the uniqueness of it. And when I think whether it's a boutique brand or a niche, you feel like you're belonging to something special, right? And that's the beauty of any brand, is when people identify with it like that.
For sure. And it's interesting because a lot of those little brands, those boutique brands, they're having the big brands build their skis for them. So there's some, and not everybody. There are some factories that that have that are building their own skis, but a lot of those little brands are having the big brands build their skis.
Are you telling me there's a little fly shit in the pepper? Is that what you're telling me?
No, no, I'm not saying that because there's nothing wrong with that. But when I was at Black Diamond, our skis were built by Blizzard,
Yeah.
and you know what? That's one of the best factories in the world. So it's
Yeah.
why not go to those guys and say, hey, you guys have awesome expertise. This is what I want in the ski. This is how I want it to behave. And they come back with the ski for you. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. I would have taken me years in my garage to figure that out.
No, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. When you see the ski films today, I wonder, what do you think of them, based on where we came from and the films of our era to today? How do you compare them, and what do you see?
Well, I'm glad that I I was filming 30 years ago instead of today because the level is so high, and the consequences are also very high. I mean, we didn't have that same kind of exposure. I mean, we weren't going 50 miles an hour in the powder around rocks and stuff. It was, so everything was, your skis were in a sense a governor in that kind of condition. So I'm blown away at what they're doing on skis now. The level is so high, and the places they're skiing, it's impressive. It's like I said, I'm glad I'm not trying to make a name for myself today.
I mean, you hit right on it. The speeds are outrageous, and the risk is high. And it all comes down to what we've been talking about, I think, is that ski, because now they can check their speed, at a high, they're up on the snow. We skied in it, they ski on
Yep.
it. And that speed check, or the ability to gain speed, is just allowing them to launch off stuff. We would have been wallowing up to our waist going off that sort of thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's my the this reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from McConkey. I was down at Powder Magazine, and Casimiro, who was the editor at the time, and we were all talking about fat skis that were just coming out, and of course McConkey was one of the true early visionaries of the sport, and he was when all the other good skiers were going, oh, fat skis, fat tourists. McConkey said, "Give me those things," and he embraced them immediately. And Casimiro was saying, "Yeah, I don't like fat skis that much because you're not down in the snow, you're not getting face shots." And McConkey says, "If you're getting face shots, you're going too slow." And that was it, exactly it. Like you said, you plane up, you're on top of the snow, you're way more maneuverable, and it's a different game.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it is another level of it, and the kids are doing amazing things. It blows my mind. You must have, of course, you've sponsored countless athletes at all the different brands you've been at, and worked with a lot of today's top athletes. What's your advice to an up and comer, a wannabe, somebody breaking in? What do you tell these kids that are sending you letters? They're going to send them to 11 now to track you down. What's your advice for that group out there trying to break through?
Stay in school. Um, um, you know, I think there's a it's way more complicated now too, in a lot of ways, way more competitive. Before it was, and I think this is still the case somewhat, that a lot of the people, these skiers, are getting discovered through competition, either the big mountain competitions or something like that. And then when they get discovered, then they go into filmmaking and, but I think, being a good person is good, is as important as being a good skier. If you're a dick, it doesn't matter how good you are. Companies don't want to associate with you. And the other thing, of course, is the whole social media following and being savvy in that realm. That's super important too, because the first thing all these brands are going to do is they're going to say, okay, what's his following like? What's her following like? And what's the vibe of that? Because all that matters towards your personal brand.
And it's ridiculously hard, right? I mean, that whole piece is just another piece of it that it's a whole different skill set that's happening off mountain, right?
Yeah, because some of those influencers, if you will, are not even that good at skiers, but they got a big following, and that's worth something.
Yeah,
So I don't think you have to be the best skier. I think you need to be part of it. So you have to be a storyteller.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, what's your memory of Warren Miller and his ability to tell a story, and what do you like to recall about him?
I mean, Warren Miller he was the best. My favorite is, it's like, when you get to the top of the 10,000-foot Aguida Midi, you look for the easy way down. There is none. Um, I mean, he was classic, and of course he started here in Sun Valley, living in a trailer, and those stories are legendary. Um, the cool thing, Warren told me one time, he goes, I made most of my money in real estate.
Yeah,
And it's like, how's that? He goes, I had made a couple of these films, and so I went to Sun Valley, and I said, hey, you should let me do a promotional film for you. And they said, that'd be great, but we don't have any money for that. And they said, I guess we could give you a couple of lots down on the river. And he's like, that's not worth anything, but okay, why not? So he did that. And of course, he did that at several other resorts around the country. And of course, you know what those lots are worth now. We
yeah,
did that. We ran those numbers at K2 once. We said, if we had just bought a house at each
yeah.
area we went to test at, and quit selling skis, we've been way better off at the end.
That is that's a hard lesson, boy, to look back at that now. I tell you, it really is. But no, I know Warren owned property all over the world, all over the country because of that, how he did that. And then of course, Greg Stump. I mean, another unique individual, great storyteller. Um, Lay that out for me. What was the experience like with Greg?
Well, Stump was also, like you said, a great storyteller, and had a different vision for what a ski movie should be like. Because, of course, it was Warren Miller and to a lesser extent Dick Barrymore that were pumping out the ski films, and they were fairly similar in their, yeah. Actually, that's not quite true, because Barrymore had a different style, and he would use the same skiers, and that, I guess there was some of that in Stumps, because if you went to a Warren Miller movie, there's a bunch of good skiing in it, but you didn't know any of the people. You didn't know any of their names or any of their backstory. And Barrymore developed that to an extent, but Stump did that to another level. I know Stump's his initial plan when he started this was he goes, I want to make it like the NFL highlight films, the recap talking about, the 1972 Super Bowl, and you get the players that were there telling their story. And that's what he was trying to develop. And so, I think that's one of the reasons that people really embrace those films is because they felt like they got to know the skiers behind the action. So, and that, again, that goes back to these kids starting out. It's what's the brand? It's what's the picture that you're painting? It's not just good skiing. It's more than that.
Absolutely. And, I mean, you were involved with some of the most iconic ski films ever produced. And, I think during the Hall of Fame induction, you said something like you finally showed them to your kids. What was, or one of them discovered it or something. Just tell me about that a little bit, and your kids seeing you ski in the old movies.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple, I guess, but they hadn't seen them. I don't think. I don't know. They were maybe early teenagers, or maybe not quite teenagers, but 10, 11, 12, something like that. And a friend was watching the kids when Cloudy and I were gone, and so she said, "Have you ever seen it?" And they're like, "No." And so she showed them and their first comment was, "Dad, you look funny with hair." Um, that was the first thing. But then my son and both my kids grew up on the race team, so they were better skiers than I was at an early age. And my son sent me a clip of one of the films of uh of me like skiing groomers, and he's like, "Oh my God, Dad, what were you doing?" He's like, oh. And then he get to the mogul, he just goes, "Oh, this is good, but oh God, what was that? What were your hands doing?" So he laughed, and then it pretty like pretty uncontrollably almost at how bad the turns were. So
Oh, I love that. That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, man. So, with going back to the new gig and 11, you know, with all of what we've been talking about, that must just bring a whole nother level of storytelling, of aspiration to 11, right? Because it's iconic, it's important, it's R&D, but all of that you're bringing, what's your vision for where it's going to go?
Well, really, it's the most of the vision is there, right? These properties, they're all in really special places, and they're picked for a reason. Because Chad Pike, who's the owner of the whole thing, he was a real estate, he ran the real estate division at Blackstone. So he's got an eye for real estate. And when you think of like Irwin Lodge down in Crested Butte doesn't get a ton of snow. I don't know, less than 300 inches annually. And Irwin Lodge is 15 miles away, and they get more snow than anywhere in Colorado. So they're just shy of Little Cottonwood
Wow.
numbers. I
Wow.
mean, it's impressive.
Yeah.
So, and then Revelstoke, of course, gets over 700 inches annually. And the Troll Peninsula, where Deplar Farm is in Iceland, also gets more snow than anywhere else. And the France locations are some of the highest skiing in Europe. So they all have a unique story. And really my job from a storytelling standpoint was just to come in and and tease out those nuances of each of those places. Because like France, for instance, um, it's in a little sleepy French hamlet, and a there's two little resorts, and I little in air quotes because the little resorts that you've never heard of are probably the size of Alta and Snowbird, right?
Yeah.
But then a short drive away is Les Arcs, and then Tignes and Val d'Isère are right there. So you got 7 resorts to choose from. You can't heli ski in France, but you can in Italy, and the place is right near the Italian border. But you can get picked up in a helicopter in France. You just can't get dropped off in heli ski. So, you can ski at the resort, take a couple warm-up runs at the resort, ski off the backside of the resort, skin up to the next ridge, ski down the backside of that, get picked up by the heli, ski a handful of runs of heli, and then ski back to the chalet at the end of the day. So it's combining those different things that make it really unique and special. And so part of it's just, again, teasing out the nuances of each of those resorts, and then just articulating that in an authentic way. So, and some of it's trying to find some of those places too. Like in Iceland, I was there for 4 days, and we heli skied in unbelievable corn. I mean, corn skiing is some of the funnest in my eyes.
Yeah.
But you don't start really till 11, till it warms up and softens a little bit. And I'm like, why don't we just skin up to this ridge line here with it, which is all west facing, firm, right? And then ski down the east face where it's just starting to soften. And we've got a little house over there that's been fixed up, and eat breakfast there and have the heli pick us up with our alpine gear, and then go heli skiing the rest of the day. And then at the end of the day, you go fishing or paddle boarding or snowmobiling. And that's like trying to stacking in 3 different activities on every day. So those are the things that, is kind of my job, is to find maybe there's some things we're missing, some opportunities we're missing in those, but mostly all that stuff is done, and it's just getting the word out.
No, I love that. And it makes you want to get out there and do it. Yeah, have you ever just considered what gliding over, on, and through snow did for you in your life?
Brought me a lot of smiles and a lot of replaced parts. But no, I mean, yeah, I never thought I was going to have a career in skiing, and certainly not one like this. It's been, I'm very fortunate that way, no question.
And how do people learn more about 11?
Go to the website, 11 Experience. And the name didn't register for me. I didn't get that, but I also learned later that the guy who started it, Chad Pike again, is a big music buff. And I don't know if you're familiar with the rockumentary Spinal Tap, but our amps go to 11. And then it all makes sense, because that's what these trips are. On a 1 to 10 scale, they're off the chart.
It's an 11.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing what becomes of that, maybe participating and taking it to 11. Mike, thanks for taking your time and hanging out with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, it'd be great to get you out to one of these properties, go ski.
That'd be great. Thanks again, Mike Hattrup. Love it, man.
Thanks, Dan. We'll see you.